The space station Horizon Prime floated like a giant glass bubble against the black backdrop of space. Its massive windows showed endless starry darkness, broken only by the soft glow of distant planets and the occasional flash of passing ships. Inside, the main conference hall buzzed with tension. Princess Yunji stood near the large holographic display, her royal blue uniform crisp and perfect. She looked nothing like the nervous young diplomat she truly was. Around her, representatives from dozens of alien species filled the room. Some tall and thin, others short and round, each wearing clothing that showed their home world's culture. At the far end of the conference table, the human delegation looked almost out of place. They were fewer in number, dressed in simple dark suits that seemed plain compared to the elaborate outfits of other species. Most of the alien representatives barely looked at them, treating the humans like newcomers who didn't belong. Chuno Park sat quietly, his hands folded on the table. He was the youngest member of the human delegation, but there was something different about him. While other diplomats whispered and made side comments, he watched and listened. His eyes moved carefully around the room, taking in every detail. The current speaker was an ambassador from the Crystalline Confederation, a being made of what looked like living glass, whose voice sounded like wind chimes. He was explaining why humans should not be given full diplomatic status. His words were complex and filled with technical language, designed to sound important and exclude others. The human species lacks the fundamental diplomatic experience, the glass ambassador declared. His translators made his voice sound cold and mechanical. They have been space traveling for less than 2 centuries. Compare this to our civilization, which has maintained galactic peace for over 10,000 years. Most of the room nodded in agreement. The humans remained silent. Chunho leaned forward slightly. He had been studying the diplomatic records, the political histories, and the hidden connections between different species for months. While others saw humans as newcomers, he saw something else. He saw patterns, opportunities, and potential that others missed. Princess Yunji noticed him then. She had been listening to the crystalline ambassador, but something about the human caught her attention. He wasn't looking angry or defensive like some of the other human delegates. Instead, he looked curious. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. Yunji saw something in Chunho's eyes that she had never seen in any other diplomat, a spark of genuine understanding. He wasn't just listening to words, he was understanding the spaces between those words. The conference continued, but something had changed. The human delegation might have looked small and inexperienced, but Chunho Park was about to show everyone that appearances could be very misleading. Outside the station's windows, stars continued their silent dance. Millions of kilometers away, events were already in motion that would change everything, though no one in that room knew it yet. This was more than just another diplomatic meeting. This was a moment that would reshape the galaxy. Alarms blared across the space station. Red warning lights flashed everywhere, turning the calm conference hall into a scene of sudden chaos. Screens around the room lit up with terrible images, entire star systems being consumed by dark, mechanical shapes that moved like a swarm of hungry insects. The Void Collective had attacked. Princess Yunji watched in shock as the holographic displays showed devastating scenes of destruction. Massive space stations crumbled. Entire planets went dark. The machine civilization was moving faster than anyone had expected, destroying everything in its path. Diplomatic representatives from different alien species began to panic. Some shouted, some froze in place. The room filled with a mix of fear and confusion. Chunho Park was different. While others lost control, he remained calm. His hands moved quickly across a small data pad, his fingers dancing over the screen. He was processing information faster than anyone else in the room. "We need a different approach," Chunho said quietly. His voice was steady, almost calm. Princess Yunji turned to look at him. Most of the other diplomats were still arguing or crying, but this human looked like he was solving a complex puzzle. Explain, she said. Junho looked up. His eyes were bright, filled with a strange mix of focus and hope. The Void Collective thinks like a machine. It follows patterns. It expects predictable responses. But what if we give it something completely unexpected? He pulled up a series of complex diagrams on the main screen. The images showed strange network patterns, lines connecting in ways that didn't make sense at first glance. Other diplomats looked confused, but Yunjai leaned closer. Most civilizations try to fight the Void Collective with big weapons, Junho continued. They use massive battleships. They try to match the machine's power. But that's exactly what the machines expect. He zoomed in on one part of the diagram. It showed how small, seemingly random connections could create big changes. Humans are good at breaking patterns, Junho said. We don't think like machines. We think like, well, humans. Creative, unpredictable. His plan was complicated but simple at its core. Instead of fighting the Void Collective directly, he proposed using a network of small, independent groups. They would move in ways that made no sense to a machine intelligence. They would create confusion. They would break every rule of traditional warfare. Princess Yunji was impressed. This was not what she expected from a human diplomat. Most of the older, more established species saw humans as young and inexperienced. But Junho was showing something different, a way of thinking that was completely new. This could work, she said softly. The other diplomats began to listen. Junho's calm explanation started to cut through their panic. He wasn't just talking about fighting. He was talking about outsmarting an enemy that seemed unbeatable. Outside the station's windows, the stars seemed to grow darker. The Void Collective was coming. But for the first time, there was a hint of hope. Junho looked at Princess Yunji. She looked back at him. Something was changing, not just in this room, but in the entire galaxy. The most important battle was about to begin, and nobody knew that better than the young human diplomat who refused to follow the old rules. The next morning, Princess Yunji found Junho in the station's small library. It was an unusual place, a quiet room filled with physical books and data crystals, a rare sight in a high-tech space station. Junho sat surrounded by stacks of information, his fingers moving carefully through ancient texts and digital records. "What are you doing?" she asked. Junho looked up with a smile. "Learning," he said simply. He showed her a collection of books about human history. There were stories of survival, of people who had faced impossible challenges. One book told how humans had saved their own planet from complete environmental destruction. Another described how they had survived multiple near-extinction events. Most advanced civilizations would have given up, Junho explained. When things get hard, they create complex systems to avoid problems. Humans do something different. We face problems. We change. We adapt. Princess Yunji listened carefully. Her own civilization had been stable for thousands of years. They had perfect systems, perfect rules. But those systems were now failing against the Void Collective. Junho showed her a digital display about Earth's history. Images flashed of people surviving in impossible conditions. A picture of people rebuilding a city after a massive natural disaster. Another of scientists working together to solve a global health crisis. Each image told a story of human resilience. "We don't have the oldest technology," Junho said, "but we have something more important. We can change. We can work together in ways no one expects." He told her about a concept called crowdsourcing, where thousands of people work together to solve complex problems. He explained how humans use creativity instead of just following rules. Where other civilizations would create a complicated system, humans would find a simple, unexpected solution. Princess Yunji was fascinated. The human in front of her was not just a diplomat. He was a storyteller. He was showing her a completely different way of looking at the universe. "Your people have only been in space for 2 centuries, she said, "but you've already changed so much." Junho nodded. "We're young," he admitted, But being young means we're not stuck in old ways of thinking. We see problems as opportunities. He showed her a small device, something he called a multi-tool. It was simple but could do many different things. It wasn't perfect, but it was flexible. This is how humans think, he said. We create things that can change and adapt. Outside the library's window, space continued its silent dance. The Void Collective was still out there, but something was different now. Princess Yunji was seeing humans in a new way. Shunho continued talking. He spoke about human music, about art, about the way people from different backgrounds could come together. Each story was a lesson about flexibility and hope. We're not the strongest, Junho said. We're not the oldest, but we never give up. We always find a way. Princess Yunji realized something important. The human in front of her represented something more than just a diplomat. He represented a new way of thinking about survival, about challenge, about hope. The universe was about to change, and humans would be the ones to change it. The royal communication device buzzed loudly in Princess Yunji's private quarters. She knew it was coming before she even answered the call. Her father's holographic image appeared, tall, serious, wearing the traditional royal robes of the astral monarchy. His eyes were hard and cold. "We must discuss your diplomatic assignment," he said. The words sounded more like a command than a conversation. Princess Yunji took a deep breath. She knew exactly what this was about. Royal marriages were not about love. They were about political connections. They were about keeping power safe. "You will meet with Prince Daewon from the Stellar Confederation," her father continued. "The marriage will secure our northern star systems. It is your duty." Shunho's face flashed in her mind. She thought about their conversations. She thought about how different he was from every other diplomat she had ever met. He wasn't just following rules. He was creating new ways of thinking. "Father," she said carefully, "Prince Daewon's systems are already falling to the Void Collective. A traditional alliance makes no sense." The hologram of her father seemed to grow larger. His anger was clear, even through the digital connection. "Tradition is what has kept our civilization safe for thousands of years," he said. "We do not change our ways because of some new threat." But Yunji had changed. Her conversations with Shunho had shown her something different. Humans did not respect old rules just because they were old. They looked for new solutions. "The old ways are failing," she said. Her voice was calm but strong. "The Void Collective is destroying everything that follows traditional strategies." Her father's image flickered. For a moment, he looked tired. For a moment, he looked human. "You are young," he said. "You do not understand the complexities of royal duty." But Yunji did understand. She understood that duty was not about following old rules. Duty was about protecting people. Duty was about finding real solutions. Outside her window, space stations moved slowly. Strange ships passed by. The universe was changing, and her father could not see it. The communication ended, but something had changed inside Princess Yunji. She thought about Shunho. He was not a royal prince. He did not come from an important family. By her culture's standards, he was nobody. But he understood something that most royal diplomats did not. The world was changing, and only those who could change with it would survive. Her communication device buzzed again. But this time, it was a message from the human diplomatic team. Shunho had found something important, something that could change everything. Princess Yunji smiled. Her father wanted her to follow old rules, but she was going to write her own rules. The Void Collective was coming. Traditional defenses would not work. She needed something different. She needed someone who could think differently. She needed Shunho. The stars outside her window seemed to shine a little brighter. Something was coming. Something was about to change. And Princess Yunji was ready. The first attack came without warning. Massive dark shapes appeared suddenly in the star system. They were not like normal ships. They moved like a swarm of metal insects, connecting and disconnecting in ways that made no sense. The Void Collective had arrived. Junho stood in the main control room, surrounded by diplomats and military leaders from different alien species. His hands moved quickly across multiple screens. He was not panicking. He was planning. They are not thinking like living beings, Junho said loudly. They are processing like a giant computer. Every move is a calculation. Princess Yanji watched him. While other military leaders looked confused, Junho seemed calm. He was studying the machine swarm's movements like someone solving a complex puzzle. One of the older alien generals spoke up. "We must launch our biggest battleships," he said. "We must fight them with pure power." Junho shook his head. "No," he said. "That's exactly what they expect. We need to be unpredictable." He pulled up a strange map on the main screen. It showed multiple small dots moving in weird patterns. These were not normal military formations. These were something else entirely. "Humans have a saying," Junho explained. "When fighting a computer, you don't use computer logic. You use human creativity." The Void Collective's ships began destroying everything in their path. Entire space stations disappeared in seconds. Planets went dark. The machine civilization was moving faster than anyone had thought possible. But Junho's plan was different. He had created small, independent human teams. These teams were not following normal military rules. They moved in ways that made no sense. They attacked from strange angles. They used technology in ways no one had ever seen before. "We are not trying to win by fighting," Junho said. "We are trying to confuse them." Princess Yanji watched in amazement. The human teams were small. They were not the biggest or the strongest. But they were smart. They were creative. They were doing things no machine could predict. One human team used old communication signals to create fake attack signals. Another team used simple radio waves to mess up the Void Collective's communication systems. Another group found ways to make the machine ships think they were attacking themselves. It was like watching someone play a complicated game. But the game was real, and lives were at stake. The Void Collective began to slow down. Its perfect machine movements became less perfect. The swarm of ships started to break apart. They could not understand the humans' strange, unpredictable attacks. "Humans are not the strongest," Junho said quietly to Yanji. "But we are the most creative." Outside the control room, space was filled with battle. Massive ships fought. Small human teams moved like ghosts. The Void Collective was powerful, but it was about to learn something important. Humans did not fight like machines. Humans fought like humans. And that made all the difference. The conference room was different now. Where there had been fear before, there was now something else. Hope. Respect. Something had changed. Junho stood at the center of the room. Around him were diplomats and leaders from dozens of different alien species. They looked at him differently now, no longer as a newcomer, but as someone who had changed everything. The Void Collective was not just a military problem, Junho explained. It was a way of thinking, a way of seeing the universe. Princess Yanji watched from the side. She saw how the other diplomats listened, really listened. Junho was not just talking about battle. He was talking about something bigger. One of the oldest diplomats in the room, a being made of what looked like living crystal, spoke up. "Explain," he said. Junho pulled up a series of images. They showed how the human teams had defeated the Void Collective. But the images were not about weapons. They were about creativity, about thinking differently. "Machines think in straight lines," Junho said. "Humans think in circles, in waves, in ways that don't make sense." He showed how human teams had used music to break machine communication, how they had used old radio signals to confuse advanced computer systems, how they had turned the Void Collective's perfect logic against itself. The crystal diplomat leaned forward. "You mean," he said slowly, "that emotions can be a weapon?" Junho smiled. "Emotions are not a weakness," he said. "They are a strength." Princess Yanji felt something change in the room. These were not just words. This was a new way of understanding everything. Other diplomats began to speak. They asked questions. They wanted to understand. The human approach was completely different from anything they had seen before. For thousands of years, Junho explained, most advanced civilizations tried to remove emotions. They thought emotions made them weak. But emotions make us strong. They help us adapt. They help us survive. He talked about human history, about how humans had survived ice ages, how they had recovered from huge disasters, how they had always found a way to continue. The room was quiet. Everyone was listening. Princess Yunji saw something amazing happening. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were learning from humans. The youngest space-traveling species was teaching the oldest ones. We are not the strongest, Junho said. We are not the smartest. But we never give up. Outside the conference room, space stations moved. Damaged ships were being repaired. The Void Collective had been stopped. But something more important was happening. A new way of thinking was spreading. The crystal diplomat stood up. We have been wrong, he said. About humans. About everything. Junho looked at Princess Yunji. She smiled. They both knew something big was happening. The galaxy was changing, and humans were leading the change. Not with the biggest weapons, not with the most advanced technology, but with something much more powerful. Hope, creativity, the ability to always find a way. The royal palace was silent. Princess Yunji stood by the large window that looked out over her home world. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. Her father waited behind her. The royal advisors stood nearby. They all knew what was coming. I will not marry Prince Daewon, Yunji said clearly. The room went completely quiet. Her father stepped forward. His face was hard. This is not a request, he said. This is a royal command. Yunji turned to face him. She was no longer the young diplomat who would simply follow orders. The battles with the Void Collective had changed her. Junho had changed her. Our old ways are not working, she said. The galaxy is changing. We must change too. The royal advisors looked shocked. No one spoke against the royal family. No one challenged tradition. But Yunji was different now. I choose Junho, she said. Her father's face turned red. He is not royal, he said. He is not even from an important family. He is just a human diplomat. Yunji smiled. He is the person who saved the galaxy, she said. She told them about Junho's strategy, how he had defeated the Void Collective when no one else could, how he saw the world differently, how he understood things that other diplomats missed. A royal marriage is not about blood, she said. It is about protecting people, about finding real solutions. The oldest advisor spoke up. He was a being who had lived for hundreds of years. The princess speaks the truth, he said quietly. Her father looked defeated. He knew something had changed. The old ways were ending. A new time was coming. Junho entered the room. He looked calm. But there was something different about him. He had faced the Void Collective. He had changed the galaxy. He was not afraid of anything. I love your daughter, Junho said simply. And I will protect her, and our people. Princess Yunji's father looked at Junho, really looked at him, not as a human, not as a diplomat, but as a person who had done something important. The room was quiet. Everyone was waiting. Outside, the stars continued their slow dance. Spaceships moved between planets. The galaxy was healing from the Void Collective's attack. Very well, her father said finally. The words were hard to say, but they were true. Junho took Yunji's hand. She looked at him. He looked at her. They both knew something special was happening. This was not just a personal choice. This was a choice for the entire galaxy. The old rules were ending. A new time was beginning. And love, real love, not just political connection, was going to lead the way. The royal advisors watched. The palace walls seemed to listen. Outside, The universe continued to move. Everything was changing. 5 years had passed since the Void Collective's attack. The galaxy looked different now. Completely different. Shunho and Eunji stood together on the observation deck of the Galactic Council station. Below them, ships from hundreds of different species moved in ways they would never have moved before. Cooperation had replaced old conflicts. "We did this," Eunji said softly. Shunho smiled. "Humans didn't do this alone," he said. "But we showed everyone a new way of thinking." Their work had changed everything. Where once diplomats followed strict old rules, now they looked for creative solutions. Where military leaders once believed in pure power, now they understood the importance of understanding and adaptation. Teams of humans now worked with alien species across the galaxy. They were not the strongest, they were not the oldest, but they were the most creative. A young diplomat approached them. She was from a species nobody had heard of 5 years ago. "We need your help," she said. "We have a complex problem." Shunho listened carefully. The problem was complicated. It involved 3 different star systems. Old-style diplomats would have created a massive, complex agreement. Shunho saw something different. "Sometimes," he told the young diplomat, "the simplest solution is the best one." He showed her how to break the problem into smaller pieces, how to think about the problem like a human would. Not with perfect logic, but with creativity and hope. Eunji watched him. She remembered when they first met, when other diplomats had ignored humans. Now, humans were leading the way in solving galaxy-wide problems. Their team had created new ways of solving conflicts. They used music to communicate. They used art to build understanding. They showed that emotions were not a weakness. Emotions were a strength. The Galactic Council had changed. Old leaders had been replaced. New ideas were welcome. Flexibility was now more important than tradition. "We are teaching the galaxy to think differently," Shunho said. A message came through. Another potential conflict was developing in a distant star system. But now, instead of preparing for war, different species were preparing to talk, to understand each other. Shunho's approach had spread. Diplomats now trained in human-style thinking. They learned to be creative, to be flexible, to see problems as opportunities. Eunji thought about her father. He had been against everything. Now he was one of the strongest supporters of the new way of doing things. "We are not just solving problems," Shunho said. "We are changing how problems are solved." Outside, a massive holographic display showed the progress. Fewer conflicts, more cooperation. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were now working together. The Void Collective had tried to destroy everything. Instead, they had helped create something new, something better. A human way of thinking had saved the galaxy. Not with the biggest weapons, not with the most advanced technology, but with hope, with creativity, with the ability to always find a way. Shunho and Eunji looked at each other. They had changed everything. And they were just getting started. The small child looked up at her parents with curious eyes. She was different from other children. Her skin showed colors from 2 different worlds. Her eyes held the wisdom of 2 cultures. "Tell me about how you saved the galaxy," she said. Shunho and Eunji exchanged a smile. Their daughter, Maya, was special. She represented something new, something that had never existed before. Shunho knelt down. "It wasn't about saving," he said. "It was about understanding." He began to tell the story. How the galaxy had been broken. How different species had been fighting. How the Void Collective had seemed impossible to stop. "We didn't win by being the strongest," Shunho explained. "We won by being the most human." Maya listened carefully. She was only 6, but she understood more than most adults. She had been raised in a world that was completely different from the one her parents had known. Eunji showed her daughter a holographic display. It showed the galaxy as it was now. Hundreds of species working together. Planets that used to be enemies now sharing resources. Technology that helped everyone, not just a few. Before, Yunji said, everyone thought being different was a problem. Now, we know being different is a strength. The world outside their home was amazing. Space stations floated like giant flowers. Ships from different species moved together. No one looked the same, but everyone worked together. Maya touched the holographic display. Colorful lines connected different star systems. Each line represented a relationship, a friendship, something that had not existed before. Humans taught the galaxy something important. Junho said, we showed that emotions are not a weakness. They are our greatest strength. He told Maya about how humans had defeated the Void Collective, not with big weapons, but with creativity, with understanding, with the ability to see problems in new ways. Their home was special. It was part research center, part diplomatic training ground. People from different species came to learn, to understand, to see the world differently. Outside, a group of young diplomats from different worlds played together. They did not look the same, but they worked together perfectly. They were learning the most important lesson: how to be different and how to work together. Maya looked at her parents. Is this what love looks like? She asked. Junho and Eunji looked at each other. They had changed everything, not just for themselves, but for the entire galaxy. Love is understanding, Junho said. Love is seeing the good in others. Love is working together. The sun began to set. Its light touched different parts of their home. Each part told a story of hope, a story of change. Maya watched the stars come out. Each one represented a possibility, a chance to do something new, to be something different. The galaxy had learned to hope again, to believe again, and it all started with two people who refused to follow the old rules. Junho and Eunji held hands. Their daughter watched the stars. Everything was possible.